Louisville's Pat Kelsey should be a serious candidate for National Coach of the Year.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode of the show brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. The Louisville Cardinals are in the midst of a 6-game winning streak, currently 12-5 on the season, a drastic turnaround from the past two seasons, and it's time to start talking about Pat Kelsey as a serious National Coach of the Year candidate. He should definitely, without a doubt, be in that conversation. We'll preview the upcoming matchup against Syracuse and discuss whether or not this is a trap game for the Cardinals. And then to conclude the show, we will dive into the weekly mailbag. So a lot of great stuff to talk about on the show today. Louisville has won the last 6 games on the schedule. They're currently 12-5 in overall play, 5-1 in conference play. As I mentioned, I'm currently out of town. This is a pre-recorded episode from Sunday. So if some new stuff ends up coming out before you hear this on Tuesday, then understand that I was not in a position to discuss that. So heading into Monday, Louisville is currently second or tied for second in the ACC at 5-1. Louisville is starting to be discussed more and more by the national media. The reputation is slowly but surely starting to get built back up, and that is thanks to Pat Kelsey. In his first season, he has drastically turned this program around from achieving 12 wins over the past 2 seasons to now having 12 wins through the first 17 games of his Louisville career. He should be, without a doubt, a serious candidate for the National Coach of the Year award. And there's a couple reasons why. Taking over Louisville wasn't just another job. Louisville is arguably a blue blood program, depending on who you talk to. One of the more historic program over the past 4 decades or so, 5 decades. But in a very odd situation, a bad situation. The past decade has been filled with numerous scandals, a ton of drama, coaching carousel, and losing games. All of the off-the-court stuff that Louisville has had to deal with, I honestly think it took away a lot of the glamour of this job. Yes, when Louisville is back where it needs to be, it's a top job in college basketball. But coming off of an 8-win season, a program that hadn't been to the tournament in about half a decade, even longer since they won their last tournament game. So whoever stepped into this position at Louisville was going to be faced with a pretty sizable rebuild. Now, you do have the luxury of transforming your roster via the transfer portal, but to the drawback of that point, it takes away the patience. So not only were you being tasked with turning Louisville around, but you really didn't have a ton of patience from the fan base in doing so. I remember when Louisville lost the game against Tennessee, there were a lot of fans that were just, the response to that, and I know you lose by double digits, blowout fashion to Tennessee, it's not great, and I don't expect people to be encouraged by it, but there was some complete doomsday reactions from that. And I say all that to say that coming into this job was not going to be easy, because not only did you have to bring Louisville back to winning games, but you had to build the reputation back up. Let's be honest. This program was a laughingstock over the past 2, maybe even 2.5 years. You'd be kidding yourself if it wasn't. We didn't talk about whether Louisville was going to lose games We talked about how much they were going to lose them by. University of Louisville, that's who we're talking about in that situation. Not losing games, it's how much you're going to lose. How the mighty have fallen. Pat Kelsey comes in and he knocks the press conference out of the park. The energy, the witty remarks that he makes, gets the fan base on board from an emotional standpoint. The team looks good in the preseason, but we all know the only thing that matters are the wins and the losses. And he comes in to a season where the strength of schedule in the non-conference is brutal. You've got Kentucky, Duke, Indiana, Tennessee, Ole Miss. Whoever you play next in the battle for Atlantis, not easy. Cardinals stayed afloat. And not to mention, you had to go through it losing Corin Johnson for the season, only played, 2 games? Out for the year. Kaysen Pryor tore his ACL in the championship of the Battle for Atlantis. Out for the year. Abubakar Traore breaks his arm, plays 2 games, breaks his arm, misses up until late December. Now, the one thing you may be able to say deserves some criticism, maybe, taking the 2 redshirt guys. I have no problem building for the future, but with only 11 players, a couple injuries could make things challenging, and it has. So, unfortunately, the worst case scenario has kind of, rose to the forefront, and it questions the move to bring in 2 redshirt guys rather than 2 guys that are able to play. But that's the only thing you can kind of look at there. And even with all of the things that Kelsey has had to deal with, the Cardinals are 12-5. They're on a 6-game winning streak, and they fit the bill as one of the best teams in the ACC. You can say whatever you want about the ACC. Again, we'll yell till everyone's listening. It's not as good as the SEC or the Big 12. We get it. Still a respectable conference. ACC teams make runs in March. We've seen it all the time. Might not necessarily be as good as years past, but the ACC is still respectable. And for Louisville to be looking like a top 4 team in the conference in year 1 of Pat Kelsey, of a coach having to bring in every single new player, stepping into this role in, late March? That he stepped in? Was it late March? Stepping into this role, or it might have been early April, but you understand what I'm saying. Not a ton of time. You got to build the roster on the fly. He did that. He dealt with a bunch of injuries. A tough non-conference schedule. And now you're currently sitting at 12-5, having won your last 6 games. And it looks like, barring something catastrophic or a big losing streak, you're in the driver's seat to be able to put yourself in the NCAA tournament. Again, 14 games left. You have to play better. There you have to continue to play good. Now, just because I'm hyping Pat Kelsey up doesn't mean I'm tearing down what other candidates are doing. I know that Kentucky fans will bring up Mark Pope. And look, Mark Pope seems like a stand-up guy. The thing that he did with the guy in the wheelchair recently, where he met with him, on that second level? That was awesome, man. So cool. I really respect Mark Pope. Even Pat Kelsey commented on Twitter, how cool that was. And that is cool. Mark Pope seems like a really, really cool dude. It's hard to dislike Mark Pope. I'll just be completely honest with you. Just like Kentucky fans are finding it hard to dislike Pat Kelsey. It's a weird dynamic in the rivalry where each fan base sort of hated the other coach, but I feel like there's a mutual respect for each coach from the other fan base. And he's having a ton of success. Kentucky is a better team than Louisville this year. They had to replace, a good amount of pretty much their whole roster, and they're playing really well. They look like one of the best teams in the SEC, potentially one of the best teams in the country. I'm not discrediting anything that Mark Pope has done. But the situations they took over were really different. He stepped into a program that had a ton of regular season success, but the tournament shortcomings were brutal. I'll admit. They were brutal. They were embarrassing. Pat Kelsey stepped into a program that hadn't made the tournament since 2019, hadn't won a tournament game since 2017, and hadn't come close to making the tournament since 2021. So different situations there. Again, not taking away anything that Mark Pope has done. He's done a fantastic job. And who knows, he may end up winning. That brings me to the next point. The difference between should be a National Coach of the Year candidate and is a serious National Coach of the Year candidate are two different things. He should be one. But I don't know if he is or not, because you look at the track record of the award, whether it's the Naismith Award for the head coach or it's the NABC head coach of the year. A lot of times it goes to a coach that is ranked pretty high, that has a ton of success. Can Louisville get to that level where Pat Kelsey would be thought about in that regard? Maybe. Usually goes to a team that's ranked at the end of the season. So that's the only reason why I'm not saying he is a serious National Coach of the Year candidate, because that's sort of out of our control in terms of, what the parameters are. But that's why I'm saying he should be one, because without a doubt, he definitely should be one. Pat Kelsey has been a fantastic hire so far, and he has completely helped this program do a 180 right off the bat. So hopefully, Louisville continuing to win more games will continue to push this narrative. The Cardinals are back in action tonight, Tuesday evening, up in Syracuse, New York. They will take on the Orange at 7 o'clock Eastern time at the Carrier Dome. We'll preview this matchup and how this might be a trap game for Pat Kelsey's Cardinals when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Fans have been using Game Time all of the month of December and January to get their tickets to the new 12-team college football playoff. And if you are one of those that likes going to large games, use Game Time to go to the national championship game. It has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I used Game Time to find tickets to the matchup against Clemson. If you're like me and you want to start going to more and more games at the Center, why don't you tune your attention to the next matchup against Virginia? You can see all of the panoramic views from your seats in the app before you buy. It shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gave me complete peace of mind, and it will you as well. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Cardinal fans, do want to give you a quick or remind you of a quick scheduling update. I'm currently out of town, like I said. This is a pre-recorded episode from Sunday. So, again, if anything happens that's notable, it will be talked about when I get back. I wanted to have a couple episodes at the beginning of the week, so I didn't just go the whole week without recording. There won't be an episode on Wednesday. If there is one on Thursday, it's going to be later on in the evening, but there definitely will be one on Friday. So I apologize for the lack of programming, but did want to leave you all with a couple of episodes. So, and I had to preview this upcoming matchup against Syracuse, which it is game day. The Cardinals taking on the Syracuse Orange tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time. I guess it's actually called the JMA Wireless Dome now. I know it as the Carrier Dome. You know it as the Carrier Dome. 7 o'clock Eastern time, taking on Adrian Autry's 8-8 Syracuse Orange. It has been an up and down season for the old Big East foe. They have kind of stumbled out to a 500 record. They're 2-3 in conference play. They've got 2 non-conference losses back-to-back against Texas and Texas Tech. They lost to Tennessee by 26. They lost to Georgetown by 4, Maryland by 27. My gosh. Conference losses to Wake Forest, Florida State, and Notre Dame. 2 of those were by double digits, and they have 2 conference wins, both of those coming in their last 2 games. A 7-point win against Georgia Tech, 8-point win against Boston College. Let's look at Syracuse in the net rankings, shall we? Currently at the moment on Sunday afternoon. Now, these net rankings change all the time. Know that this is from Sunday afternoon. Syracuse is 144th in the net. They've risen up about 14 spots since winning the past 2 games. They're 8-1 in quad 3 and quad 4 victories. The main thing that has been plaguing this Syracuse team is that they beat who they're supposed to beat. But outside of that, you don't see much more. They are currently 0-7 against quad 1 and quad 2 opportunities. Texas, Texas Tech, Tennessee, Maryland, Florida State, Notre Dame, and Georgetown. So 7 of the 8 losses for the Orange come via the quad 1 and quad 2. This is a quad 2 opportunity against the Louisville Cardinals. For Louisville, this is a quad 3 opportunity. Syracuse is an interesting team because it feels a lot like what could be a trap game. The Orange are 8-8. They're playing better basketball. JJ Starling is back, one of the best scorers, if not the best scorer in the ACC. Broke his hand back on December 2nd and missed a good chunk of the month of December leading into January. He is back and continuing to score at a high level, and he's what makes this team go. Really, really prolific scorer. Right as a freshman, he averaged double digits in scoring for Notre Dame. He ends up transferring over to Syracuse and continues to get better and better. Now, he's not a great three-point shooter. He takes about 5 threes a game, but he shoots it at 27%. That's really not a good number there. Not a great free throw shooter, but does shoot 47% from the field. One thing that JJ Starling is really good at is getting downhill, making really tough shots, doesn't need a ton of space to create his own offense, and can fade away. I mean, his offensive bag is really deep. It is advanced, and there's not a lot he can't do inside the three-point line. So, JJ Starling at 6'4", and what's crazy is that he's one of Syracuse's smallest starters. I mean, you look at the Syracuse starting lineup from the last game, and I mean, it's actually pretty interesting. I mean, JJ Starling, 6'4", Lucas Taylor, 6'5", Elijah Moore, 6'4". You have Eddie Lampkin Jr. at 6'11", and then you also have Jair Davis at 6'7". Now, Syracuse, like Louisville, dealing with some injury issues and some medical issues as well. The only difference is we know that both of the Louisville players, Corin Johnson and Kason Pryor, are out for the season. Donnie Freeman, the freshman that has been really, really good for Syracuse this year, the team's second leading scorer at 13.4 points a game, 7.9 rebounds. He suffered a right foot injury a little while ago, or a couple games ago, had to miss the last game. And currently, I don't know, he might be cleared before, he might be rolled out before, but as of this recording on Sunday afternoon, we don't know the status of Donnie Freeman. Chance Westry, it sounds like it's a medical issue is what Syracuse is referring to it as, and his status is questionable. So you really can't, I don't really know what to say in regards to his availability. Syracuse is just a team that has struggled to beat good teams. We saw their willingness to run a zone recently. I wonder, with Louisville being not a great three-point shooting team, I wonder if you're going to see the Syracuse try to zone Louisville and force them to shoot their way out of it. Obviously, it's not a Jim Boeheim type zone, but Adrian Autry in his second season has been able to show the willingness to go to that. 2 statistics that I find pretty interesting that are going to be key factors in this one, and I think that they play into sort of the into the keys to the game here for the Cardinals. Number one, Syracuse is, as of Sunday, the worst three-point shooting team in the conference. One of the worst three-point shooting teams out there with 29.14%. That's even worse than Louisville, who's at right about 30% and some change. So it's something that, you have to defend the three ball well. I know that Louisville at times is susceptible to giving up some open shots. That has to be corrected. And Syracuse is also 327th in the country in turnovers forced. They don't force a ton of turnovers. It's about 10 a game, third worst in the ACC, behind or in front of, I think it's Notre Dame, and I'm going to go nuts thinking about who the other team is. Notre Dame is one of them. But this is just a game I feel like, Syracuse has a ton of size. Eddie Lampkin Jr., really good down low, about 10 points a game, 8 rebounds. You just have to, like I said, Louisville's going to have to play to their strengths, play quick, get good shots. Don't have to live and die by the three-point shot. You can, allow the three-point shot to be able to result from successfully driving to the lane and kicking out to open shooters. I think it's a game that I don't like. Louisville hasn't really had a trap game against a Power 4 opponent yet. Like, they didn't play well against UTEP or Eastern Kentucky, but this is one game that I feel like that Louisville is going to be favored to win by more than whatever they have been so far. Maybe not Clemson, but because they are on the road. But Louisville should win this game. This is sort of a trap game, and we'll see if Louisville's able to, come down off of that emotional high from last week against Clemson and Pittsburgh and just be able to refocus here in that. But we have no evidence that suggests that they won't, and I'm hoping that when we come back, we're going to be talking about a 7-game winning streak and previewing the second matchup against Virginia. But to conclude the show, we will dive into the weekly mailbag, a couple of key questions about tournament opportunities and much more when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine, whether you're tidying up, cleaning out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year. Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. I'm currently looking for furniture, and their huge selection makes it easy to find pieces that fits my style and budget. My favorite part is the free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. Wayfair's site was so easy to navigate, and I found everything I needed in no time. There's something for every style and every home. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals. Just give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. Cardinal fans, I want to take the time again to thank you all, as I always do, for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Want to answer some questions before we have about a day or maybe 2-day hiatus from recording. But first question, I feel like, is one that many Louisville fans are wondering. I lost my train of thought. If the season were to end today, do you feel like Louisville is a tournament team? I do. I don't really think that it is that big of a question at the moment. It depends on who you want to refer to. Like, I'm going to just use Joe Lunardi's bracketology. As of last Friday, Louisville was a 9 seed in the Atlanta Regional, which actually would have them playing in Lexington. And that's before they got the quad 1 victory on the road at Pittsburgh. So you would imagine that would allow them to potentially jump up. And the second part to this question is kind of referring to this. What seed would you project them at? I'd say an 8 seed, 12-5, 5-1 in conference play. Not the greatest against quad 1, but it looks like that the West Virginia, it depends. I mean, West Virginia, Indiana just lost big time to Iowa. So who knows what the net ranking looks like. I would probably say an 8 seed for me. If Louisville keeps playing as good as they are, will your expectations change from making the tournament to winning a tournament game? I mean, unless Louisville were to take this winning streak into February and like lose less than 10 games and maybe win a game in the ACC tournament, I'm going to keep my expectations grounded. Like, you never get too high, never get too low. Like, when things weren't looking good, you stay the course, and when things look a lot better, you still stay the course. Because there's 14 games left in the regular season before the ACC tournament. So I'm going to still keep it at just making the tournament. Now, will that change? I mean, I don't see it changing, especially with no Cason Pryor, no Corin Johnson. Now, like I said, if Louisville were to win out the remainder of January, the last 4 games, and pick up some good wins against SMU and Wake Forest, and they, win the majority of games in February, maybe, depending on their seeding, depending on who they play, it depends. I'm not going to put the cart before the horse yet, though. I'm just going to kind of take it game by game. So, can Louisville compete with Duke for the number 1 spot in the conference? Good question. Currently, Louisville is a game back of the Duke Blue Devils. Duke is 6-0 in conference play. Louisville is they're 5-1. You look at the remaining schedule for Duke. They still have to go through that home and home with Carolina. They'll play at Clemson. They'll play at Virginia. They've already beaten Pittsburgh, and they beat them by a lot. I just don't see Duke losing that number 1 spot. And then you're also assuming that the Cardinals are going to not lose very many games left, which they might not. But I feel like Duke is the best team in the ACC. I don't think that that's really up for discussion at this point. But I know Louisville played them tough, when things weren't really looking all that great. But Duke is obviously playing better than they did in early December too. So I'm not even really worried about that. The only thing that I'm really worried about right now is let's get that top 4 finish, and then we'll worry about everything else afterwards. So that's just kind of where I'm at. You said that you wanted this team to lose no more than 2 games in the month of January. Sitting at 4-0, what is your prediction for the rest of the month record-wise? Really good question. These are some great questions. I appreciate you all for asking them. If you want to ask a question or put it in the next mailbag, be sure to drop a comment in the YouTube section below. Send the Locked On Louisville Twitter page a DM, whatever you need to do. Last 4 games of January: at Syracuse versus Virginia, at SMU, and versus Wake Forest. 2 home games, 2 road games. I'm going to say 3-1. I think they beat Syracuse. I'm going to say, Virginia, SMU, Wake Forest, they lose one of those games. I'll predict it and say, who knows, maybe not Syracuse. I'm sorry. Maybe SMU. Is there a chance that they could go 4-0? Of course. Will they? I mean, who knows? If they do lose a game, I can see it probably being to SMU. I'm going to predict 3-1, and going 7-1 in the month of January. That's fantastic. You would then end the month of January 15-6. That's a really good point to be going into the month of February, where you have more road games, but the schedule gets a little bit less challenging in terms of the teams you're playing. So that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Just a reminder, guys, I won't be back until about Thursday, maybe Friday. I'm going to do what I can to get an episode in Thursday night to where we don't go 2 days without recording. But just a heads up, there won't be an episode Wednesday. If anything happens, we'll talk about it when we come back. I know that there's going to be someone that says, "Oh, why no episode today?" Again, I'm sorry. I apologize. But I'll be back as soon as I can. We'll see you then. Until next time, you're tuned into the Locked On Louisville podcast. Go Cards.